In a sudden flash of insight, Han Li's thoughts returned to the Water Divination Palace. Back then, that large-headed child had passed him a trove of memories, cultivation understandings layered atop the Water Divination time arts. Within those inherited recollections, a term had surfaced again and again: law abilities. Yet there had been no clear explanation, only the bare mention, like a half-drawn sword left in its sheath. At the time, Han Li had only forced himself to remember it all, storing it away for some future day. Now, staring at what had just appeared, he felt the old note in his mind stir. Could this golden finger projection be a kind of law ability? He did not linger on the question. His gaze sharpened like a blade edge as he fixed it upon the golden finger projection, carefully reading the shifting permutations of time law power and the distribution of those time law threads within it. The profound patterns were bewitching, so exquisite they seemed less like a technique and more like an unrivaled masterpiece. Before he knew it, his mind sank into it completely, as though he were contemplating a divine scroll carved by heaven itself. The finger projection then rose, flying back upward, and slipped through the great hole in the ceiling, vanishing in an instant. Han Li immediately shut his eye of truth, then closed his own eyes as well, painstakingly recalling every nuance of that astonishing sight. After a long while, he reopened the eye of truth at his will. A beam of golden light shot forth from his eye and pierced into the hole above. Once more, the same golden finger projection manifested, allowing him to observe it again. Again and again, he repeated this, closing, recalling, opening, observing, until insight slowly accumulated like sand in a vial. Yet with every gain came an even greater sense of what he still could not fathom. Even so, he had already engraved all of the time law permutations within the projection into memory. Even if he left this place, he could continue to study it at leisure. By now he was drained to the bone, and he had gleaned what he could from that projection for the moment. Continuing would only be stubbornness without profit. He turned his attention forward into the hole ahead. Inside, the ball of golden light still flashed without pause, like a heart beating within the earth. With his reversal true axis driven to its limit, Han Li swiftly recovered his freedom of movement. He lifted an arm, and above his palm burst forth bright golden radiance, interwoven with 10 time law threads. With a grasping motion, the light and threads shaped themselves into a great golden hand, which seized the ball of golden light and tried to wrench it upward. The ball did not move in the slightest, as if it were nailed to the river of time itself. Han Li's expression flickered. He drew in a deep breath, and 16 more time law threads appeared within that golden hand. In an instant, the hand swelled to twice its size, and the surging fluctuations of time law power it released grew markedly stronger. Even so, the ball of golden light remained immovable. A hint of surprise crossed his face. He withdrew the golden hand, contemplated briefly, then raised his hand again, this time summoning the profound heavenly gourd. A dull thump rang out as a beam of green light burst from the gourd and shot toward the ball of golden light. Yet the beam had barely left the region covered by the reversal true axis when the surrounding time law powers halted it cold, as though invisible chains had seized it. Han Li slowly crouched, extending his hand down into the hole in the ground. Only then could the green beam reach the ball of golden light inside. The beam tried to drag the prize into the gourd, but no matter how it strained, the ball stayed fixed in place. Han Li's face darkened. He stowed the gourd away and unleashed yet another secret technique, then another after that. Time passed. In the end, he stopped, resignation settling into his eyes like frost. He had tried everything he could think of, yet the ball of golden light refused to yield. He stared down into the hole, conflict twisting in his heart. Was he truly going to leave something so precious behind? He could not bear it. That ball contained more time law power than his golden lock and his golden flag combined, and that was without even counting the profound, intricate mysteries hidden within its glow. If he could secure it, it would become a great aid on the road ahead. At that moment, a fresh idea struck like a sudden palm thunder. Han Li immediately formed a hand seal. Radiant golden light erupted from his mantra-treasured axis, and the golden light before him condensed into the clear time vial. He switched to another seal. The golden light around his body swept outward, transforming into countless grains of golden sand. These three surges of time law power intertwined, forming a rapidly revolving golden vortex that compressed inward at his command. A flash of terrifying time law power cut through the air, and the vortex transformed into a spinning golden ring. Now, using his three time attribute cultivation arts together, Han Li could conjure this golden ring with relative ease. Go! He thrust his palm forward. The golden ring shot out and struck the ball of golden light, immediately revolving at high speed and blazing with dazzling brilliance, outshining even the pervasive gold that filled the palace. A tremendous suction force erupted from the ring and wrapped around the ball of golden light. At long last, the surface of the ball rippled faintly. It was the first wavering it had shown. Han Li's eyes lit up. Several strands of golden radiance rose unwillingly from the ball and vanished into the golden ring. The ball struggled to resist, but it was helpless before that revolving ring. The ring's glow intensified further, and more golden light was drawn upward and swallowed. Moments later, the ring trembled and released a thin strand of golden light. It flashed into Han Li's body and appeared upon the mantra-treasured axis. Han Li was delighted. He poured in even more power. The suction grew stronger and stronger. Golden light streamed out of the shrinking ball and disappeared into the ring, only to be refined into time law threads. The ball diminished visibly until, before long, it vanished entirely. In the instant it disappeared, the golden light in the palace rippled and then faded away. The restraining time law powers that had bound everything also dispersed, and for the first time in countless years, the flow of time returned to normal. Immediately afterward, dull thumps echoed as heavenly court cultivators and true mantra sect disciples fell from midair and crumpled to the ground. Han Li's face tightened with surprise. He approached quickly, only to find them all dead. How could this be? A moment ago, they had looked alive. Their bodies were uninjured, and their nascent souls still lingered within them, yet their true souls had vanished without trace. Han Li swept his spiritual sense over them with extreme care, and soon detected something. Within the mind of the nearest corpse remained an almost imperceptible time law aura. Without his formidable spiritual sense and his cultivation in the laws of time, he would never have noticed it. That aura carried an extremely aggressive intent, eerily similar to the golden finger projection. It was clearly that fierce finger intent that had shattered the person's soul. Han Li examined the rest and found the same fate repeated. So the golden finger projection not only possessed terrifying penetrative force, it could also strike directly at the soul. Rather than fear, curiosity deepened within Han Li. After determining their cause of death, he captured the nascent souls of the two golden immortals in the palace, then ignored the corpses and turned his gaze back to the mantra-treasured axis behind him. Around it now floated 39 time law threads. Refining that ball of golden light had granted him 13 new threads. Yet the profound time law permutations hidden within the ball had been wiped away when it was converted into threads. That loss left a slight disappointment in his heart. Still, 13 time law threads were already a vast gain. Asking for more would be greedy beyond reason. He searched the palace once again, but found nothing else of value. Leaving the palace behind, Han Li continued deeper into the valley. Before long, he reached its end without encountering any further buildings, so he flew out of the valley and carried on with his search. Amid the wind and clouds, Han Li flew like a lone sword shadow, yet his mind never left the smallest detail. While cutting through the air, he summoned one storage tool after another, threads of spiritual sense slipping inside them in quick succession. These storage tools had been taken from the true mantra sect disciples he had just dealt with. He hadn't collected them out of greed for whatever trinkets they carried. He wanted intelligence, clues about the true mantra sect to temper risk and steady his footing, and perhaps to point the way toward deeper troves. He had only been in these ruins a short time, yet his harvest was already astonishing. The water divination time arts, the mantra axis scripture, that golden flag, the blue shield, 13 more time law threads, and dozens of storage tools. His heart stirred at the thought of what else might be hidden here, to the point that his so-called reincarnation palace mission had faded into something distant. If the worst came to pass, he would simply fail and hand over 50,000 immortal origin stones. So be it. Before long, he had searched every storage tool from the true mantra sect disciples, his brows knit, for none of them contained anything truly useful about the sect itself. With a calm breath, he put them away and turned to the storage tools taken from the heavenly court cultivators, expecting little. Then a white flash flickered in his palm, and a jade slip appeared. It was a map. A crude, hurried thing, yet unmistakably a map of the true mantra sect. Han Li's gaze sharpened. He had not held high hopes for the heavenly court cultivator's belongings, so this was an unexpected stroke of fortune. That heavenly court golden immortal had likely obtained it by some method, planning to use it to rake the true mantra sect clean during the invasion. Fate had turned the blade. Countless years later, the map now fell into Han Li's hands. He halted, descended onto a mountain, and poured his spiritual sense into the slip. The drawing was rough, marking only the main regions and prominent landmarks, but even a coarse chart was better than blindness. According to the map, the true mantra sect had once been far grander than the Blaze Dragon Tao. It was divided into 5 vast areas: Water Divination, True Mantra, Flowing Fire, Earth Dawn, and Wood Emperor. Each region alone was several times the size of the Blaze Dragon Tao. The True Mantra area sat at the center like the heart of a great beast, while the other 4 lay to the north, south, east, and west. Han Li's thoughts turned like a well-honed mechanism. The Water Divination Palace should be within the Water Divination area, and from all signs, he was currently within the True Mantra area itself. He stowed the slip, rose again, and surveyed the land. White mist drifted here as well, but it was far thinner than in the Water Divination area. With his infernal devilish eyes, his visibility was much improved. Below him stretched an unremarkable mountain range with no defining features, and the map was too crude to pinpoint his exact location within the True Mantra area. Han Li remained unruffled. Having a rough map was already a great step forward. At the very least, he no longer wandered like a blind man groping for a door. Some important sites across the 5 regions were labeled. Once he grasped his approximate position, he could follow the lines of the map toward the marked places. A week passed like a breath between sword strokes. On this day, a streak of azure light cut in from afar and settled atop a mountain. The glow faded, revealing Han Li. In these past days, he had made further observations, enough to strengthen his conviction that he was indeed in a fragmented section of the True Mantra area. Yet the precise spot still eluded him. He was more wary now. He swallowed a pill, rested only briefly, then resumed without delay. Not long after, his expression shifted. He veered sharply aside. Ahead hung a spatial rift more than 100 feet long, a gash in the world like a hungry wound. He skirted it carefully and continued. He had once nearly lost his life by stumbling into such a rift. Since then, every step through these ruins was measured and alert. Soon another spatial rift appeared, and the air began to pulse with bursts of spatial fluctuations. Han Li raised an eyebrow as a thought formed. He advanced cautiously, then descended before a cliff. It was the end of the landmass he had been traveling upon. Beyond the cliff yawned a vast expanse of nothingness, crowded with countless spatial rifts of all sizes, like rows of all-devouring mouths, waiting to snap shut. Farther out stood a giant translucent barrier that joined heaven and earth, the same type of spatial barrier he had encountered before. Outside it, chaotic spatial currents churned in frenzy, twisting and gnashing like invisible beasts. Han Li ignored the immediate turbulence and cast his gaze farther still. In the distant haze, he could make out another spatial barrier, and beyond that, what looked like the edge of another landmass. Even through layers of spatial disorder, he could sense faint spatial fluctuations emanating from it. Hesitation flickered across his face, only for a moment. Then his resolve settled like iron. With a thought, he summoned 2 treasures, one golden and one blue, the time attribute immortal treasures he had acquired earlier. By now, he had refined them to a considerable extent. He began to chant. Rippling blue light poured from the blue shield, enveloping his entire body in a protective mantle. The golden flag swelled several times larger, and countless specks of golden radiance surged forth, revolving around him in swift arcs until they formed a glittering river of golden light. a flowing, resplendent current that made the void itself seem dim. Hanli glanced at the two treasures, gave a small, satisfied nod, and flew straight into the unstable space ahead. Here, the world's fabric was brittle and treacherous. Spatial rifts filled the region. They did not drift and whirl like those within the earlier spatial storm, but that did not make them safe, only quietly lethal. Hanli pushed his infernal devilish eyes to their limit. He threaded through the gaps between rifts with painstaking care, yet still made decent speed. Before long, he reached the spatial barrier. He swept his sleeve, sending a streak of azure swordlight crashing into the barrier. The swordlight shattered instantly. Repelled back into the form of an azure flying sword, the barrier only trembled faintly before returning to stillness. Hanli's eyes narrowed in surprise. He stowed the sword, then extended a finger. Bright golden light flared over him. 36 time law threads emerged, converging toward his fingertip like tributaries feeding a single spear point. An indistinct golden finger projection shot forth, laced with the ripples of time law power. His own attempt to imitate the terrifying finger projection he had witnessed before. It was far from the real thing. Faint and hazy, yet vastly more formidable than his sword strike. A dull thud sounded. The projection tore through the barrier as if it were paper, opening a large hole. Hanli's face lit with quiet satisfaction. Lowering his arm, he murmured, "Not bad. I'll call this the heaven-piercing finger." He flew through the breach and into the raging spatial turbulence beyond. The moment he entered, a ferocious gray wind slammed into him from the side. Yet he had prepared for this. He summoned a pair of protective immortal treasures and steadied himself. At the same time, the river of golden light around him surged and swelled, expanding in an instant until it overwhelmed the gray wind and scattered it. Only then did the golden flag's true nature reveal itself more clearly. A rare treasure that could both defend and strike, offense and protection, woven into the same flowing radiance. Hanli did not pause. He pressed onward, flying toward the distant landmass. All around him, savage forces howled. Fierce winds, glacial currents, waves of fire, and countless spatial vortexes and rifts. This spatial storm was far more terrifying than the last one he had endured. And a thread of perplexity ran through him. Since entering these ruins, he had already encountered 3 spatial storms, each stronger than the previous, as if the heavens themselves were stacking blades against his path. He drove the golden river to ward off the turbulence and forced his way forward. The turbulence alone was troublesome, but manageable. The true threat lay in the spatial rifts swept along by it, rifts brimming with immense spatial power. Even the golden river struggled against them. Hanli had to counter and repel them by other means, and his progress slowed to a crawl. Fortunately, the distance between the two landmasses was not great. He endured, step by step, until most of the gap had been crossed. Then, like thunder splitting the sky, a furious draconic roar rang out. Hanli turned toward the sound, and his expression changed drastically. A colossal white storm was charging straight at him, tearing through the surrounding spatial turbulence as though it were thin cloth. It was another spatial storm, yet not like the others. This one was even more formidable than the storm that had nearly ended him after he was sucked into a spatial rift. Within it, countless blades of white light roared and spun, each blade infused with violent spatial power capable of shredding anything in its path. It was terrifyingly fast. In the blink of an eye, the white storm arrived, and before Hanli could gain even a breath of distance, it swallowed him whole. Within the raging spatial storm, Hanli was like a lone leaf cast into a boundless sea, battered by turbulent currents and hurled about against his will. Without hesitation, he unfurled his time-spirit domain. In an instant, the chaos around him slowed, as though shackled by invisible chains, granting him a brief breath of relief. Yet the raining blades of white light were only slightly hindered, still cutting down toward him like relentless heavenly punishment. Hanli drew a steadying breath and formed a rapid succession of hand seals. The golden flag circling him flared with deeper brilliance, then sank into his domain as if returning to its true home. With a heavy, muffled thump, the river of golden radiance around him swelled to nearly 10 times its former breadth, and the golden stars within it ballooned and churned, surging forward with domineering momentum. At the same time, The blue shield shone with dazzling light as it expanded several fold, and upon its surface the faint projection of a winding river emerged, coiling and flowing like living water. As the white light blades plunged into the river of golden stars, they were seized by the current and swept aside against their will, unable to reach Hanli's body. Yet the number of blades was terrifying. Some still forced their way through the golden torrent now and then. Those stragglers met the blue shield, only to warp the instant they made contact. Their trajectories bent away as though the shield itself twisted space. Seeing the profound might of this treasure, Hanli's heart settled slightly. Even so, he knew time was not on his side. Maintaining his spirit domain while driving two time-aspected immortal treasures at full power was a brutal drain. Even for him, he could not sustain such expenditure for long. About 15 minutes later, he finally broke free of the storm, stumbling out into open space. But what awaited him was no safe haven. Rather, it was a wasteland of chaos. Spatial turbulence churned everywhere, and the two nearby continents he had known were gone without a trace. In that instant, Hanli understood. The earlier storm had swept him to an unknown region, and he had no clue where he now stood. This turbulence was lethally dangerous, and his immortal spiritual power was already running thin. If he could not find shelter soon, death could truly claim him here. He swallowed a pill at once, then flipped his hands to produce a pair of mid-grade immortal origin stones, that drawing on them to replenish what he could, while forcing himself to recall the positions of the continents from before. Yet within the storm he had lost all sense of direction. No matter how he searched his memory, he could not reestablish their bearing. After a brief, cold moment of deliberation, he chose a direction and sped onward, still keeping his time-spirit domain and the two immortal treasures active. The strain was severe, but it granted him the ability to cut through the turbulence at high speed, and at this moment, survival outweighed all else. His luck, at least, had not completely abandoned him. After flying for a time, he spotted a landmass ahead. Joy flickered across his pale face, and he hurried toward it. Simultaneously, he gathered what remained of his immortal spiritual power and extended a finger. A golden finger projection shot forth and struck the spatial barrier before him, that punching a large hole clean through it. Hanli flashed through that opening like lightning. The violent pressure that had been grinding at him vanished at once, as though he had crossed a boundary between death and life. He looked pale as paper now. He withdrew his spirit domain and the two treasures and took several deep breaths, forcing his breathing to steady. Lowering his gaze, he saw a vast mountain range spread below, rich with spiritual chi and seemingly untouched by battle's ravages. Here, the obstructing white mist was absent. Though his spiritual sense still could not extend very far, his infernal devilish eyes granted him clear sight over great distances. After a short scan of the surroundings, he descended, carefully avoiding several nearby spatial rifts as he dropped toward the ground. Once he landed, he sat cross-legged and rested. Nearly half a day passed before he opened his eyes again, rose, and set off in a chosen direction. As he flew, his gaze and spiritual sense constantly combed the area. The mountain range stretched beyond the horizon, lush and verdant, with spirit plants brimming with vitality. Hanli did not leave such gains behind. Whenever he encountered them, he collected them all and stored them into his storage tools without hesitation. But as he passed over a valley, his expression shifted. He turned toward a distant direction, a peculiar look in his eyes. Violent fluctuations of spiritual power were erupting there. Clearly, a battle was underway. From the aura alone, the combatants were no ordinary figures. They had to be cultivators who had entered the true mantra sect ruins seeking treasures. Hanli's mindset was no longer what it had been when he first entered the ruins. He wanted only to mind his own affairs and hunt for opportunities, not be dragged into meaningless conflicts. He was about to depart, when suddenly a burst of radiant crimson light erupted skyward from the battlefield. The aura within that crimson brilliance was one he recognized. Hanli released a faint sigh, and his body blurred into an indistinct shadow as he flew toward the disturbance. At his speed, he arrived swiftly, and as expected, two figures were locked in fierce combat. One had a gigantic fiery crimson sword hovering above his head, and at his waist hung an antiquated golden mirror. Immortal Lord Hot Flame. Facing him was a tall, thin man in azure robes, the same immortal envoy who had once appeared in Jade Gathering City alongside Gong Shu Tian years ago, surnamed Wang. Han Li did not reveal himself. He hid nearby and watched. The azure-robed man's cultivation clearly exceeded Immortal Lord Hot Flame's by a wide margin. He held the initiative at every turn. Above his head hovered a giant projection of an azure moon, releasing wave after wave of azure light. Each wave transformed into hundreds of beams that screamed toward Immortal Lord Hot Flame, like a rain of arrows forged from law power. Immortal Lord Hot Flame's giant fiery sword spun rapidly, sending out waves of crimson sword projections to meet them. At the same time, he wore a crimson robe embroidered with fiery holy birds, phoenix, vermilion bird, and more. An immortal treasure in its own right, constantly erupting with scorching crimson flames. The azure beams looked plain at first glance, yet their lethality was terrifying. They pierced through sword chi and flames with ease, breaking through and raining down on Immortal Lord Hot Flame. Only the waves of golden light from his golden mirror were able to slow them significantly, but the sheer number of beams forced him into ceaseless evasion, his breathing and movements strained. The azure-robed man's voice thundered through the air. "Don't test my patience any further, Huozhuozi. Hand over the map, and I'll let you leave. Keep resisting, and I'll kill you first." Immortal Lord Hot Flame was already wounded in several places, blood staining his form, yet his eyes remained fierce. He spat back. "Shut your mouth, you Heavenly Court scoundrel! If you want the map, then come and take it." A cold snort, killing intent flickered through the azure-robed man's gaze. "Then I'll grant you the fate you desire and send you to your grave." At his command, the azure moon above swelled drastically, and the number of beams it released multiplied several-fold in a single breath. Immortal Lord Hot Flame's face darkened. He opened his mouth and expelled a ball of blood essence into the golden mirror at his waist. The mirror shot forth, blazing with fiery golden light as it expanded to several times its size, positioning itself before him like a massive shield. It had barely settled when countless azure beams slammed into it. The mirror's golden ripples still carried their slowing effect, but these beams were far faster than before. The deceleration was no longer obvious. A chain of resounding clangs rang out as the mirror trembled violently. The golden light around it flickered, as if it might extinguish at any moment. Yet it endured, rooted in place with stubborn resilience, refusing to fade. Surprise flashed through the azure-robed man's eyes, quickly giving way to greed as he stared at the mirror. With another cold harumph, azure light erupted from his body, expanding outward into an azure spirit domain spanning several dozen kilometers. And right then, without warning, a burst of green light appeared beside the azure moon and instantly enveloped it. The azure moon dimmed at once. Its radiance collapsed, revealing its true form, an azure jade bead immortal treasure. Simultaneously, a large golden lock manifested out of thin air behind the azure-robed man and shot toward him like lightning. "Who goes there?" His expression changed drastically. He whirled around and spat out a silver plate that crashed against the golden lock with a loud clang. In the same motion, he swept his sleeve, releasing an azure bamboo slip immortal treasure that transformed into an azure light barrier, sealing him in from all directions. Even as he defended, his other hand reached upward in a grabbing motion toward the jade bead. A resounding boom erupted as a mountainous azure hand formed above it and slammed down upon the green light. With a dull thump, the green light shattered, revealing a green gourd within. Countless green runes swarmed around the gourd like living script, and the law power it emitted made the surrounding space buzz and tremble incessantly. An essential immortal treasure. The azure-robed man's eyes lit up with unrestrained ecstasy. At his urging, a massive azure rune appeared above the gigantic hand, and the hand closed firmly around the green gourd. The gourd trembled violently, clearly struggling to break free, yet the mountainous azure hand held it fast, refusing to let it escape. At the sight of that emerald gourd, Immortal Lord Hot Flame's gaze flickered as if struck by a sudden thought. That gourd, could it be? The azure-robed man, however, did not pause to ponder. He swept his eyes over the surroundings, then formed a swift hand seal. The rune upon the mountainous azure hand flared, and mighty law power, surged like a tidal wave. With a heavy boom, the gourd's protective green radiance was crushed, and its struggling instantly faltered. Delight flashed across the azure-robed man's face. He curled his fingers in a beckoning gesture, drawing the green gourd back toward himself. Yet the gourd had not even flown several dozen feet when space behind him rippled. Silent, subtle, like a blade drawn in darkness, and Han Li stepped out as if walking from the void itself. The moment he appeared, both sleeves snapped outward. A pair of giant azure swords roared down from above, sword-light blazing, carrying a power that seemed ready to cleave heaven and earth in twain. The azure-robed man did not look the least bit startled. A faint, disdainful twitch tugged at his lips, as though he had long expected such a hidden strike. He sealed with one hand. The azure jade bead above his head slipped free of the green light released by the profound heavenly gourd, then shone brilliantly. Two thick pillars of azure light shot forth and collided with the descending swords. Two world-shaking impacts rang out. Nearby space quivered violently, and the giant swords were forced back, shrinking as they retreated. Their once dazzling sword light dimmed, their spiritual nature seemingly wounded. Han Li's face went pale, and he staggered back as though his insides had been rattled by the clash. The azure-robed man turned to Han Li with a cold sneer, then immediately redirected his attention to the green gourd. In his eyes, this late golden immortal assailant was merely courting death, yet he should still thank him for delivering an essential immortal treasure right into his grasp. The gourd continued to be dragged forward, still caught in the grip of the giant azure hand, but at that very instant, it shuddered violently again. Green radiance burst forth across its surface, and a deep thunderous rumble rolled from within, like a storm sealed behind a lid. The azure-robed man's expression changed sharply. Before he could react, a blinding streak of golden light shot out from the gourd and slammed into the protective azure barrier around him. A resounding explosion followed. Despite the azure bamboo slip's seemingly indestructible presence, the golden light pierced through it with ease and bored straight through the azure-robed man's chest and abdomen, leaving a blackened, scorched-edged void. Everything happened in a breath. Even Immortal Lord Hot Flame was stunned by the sudden reversal. Blood sprayed from the azure-robed man's mouth as shock and fury twisted his features. If he had not shifted aside at the final moment, that golden light would have pierced his dantian and ended him on the spot. Bewildered yet swift to respond, he formed a seal and spat out a ball of azure flame. The fire spread over him, swallowing his body as he fled like an azure fireball, abandoning all immortal treasures except the azure jade bead. But as he tried to escape, several translucent chains emerged from the surrounding space without warning. They pierced straight into his mind, and his protective light offered no resistance at all. In an instant, his body locked up, the expression on his face freezing stiff. He still drifted forward, but his speed fell drastically, like a hawk with its wings bound. In the next heartbeat, Han Li appeared in front of him amid a crackle of lightning. His complexion was already steady again, with not a trace of weakness. He drove a fierce punch forward, and an azure fist projection erupted, smashing down upon the azure-robed man's head and ending him cleanly. Within the remains, a translucent cage revealed itself, and inside it an azure soul struggled. Han Li flicked a finger. A thread of golden lightning shot forth, struck into the spiritual sense cage, and instantly annihilated the soul. The cage dissolved back into several translucent chains that vanished into Han Li's mind as though they had never existed. Only then did Han Li sweep his sleeve, gathering the fallen remains and the scattered immortal treasures, storing them all into the flower branch space. There was no need for you to use such underhanded means against a mere mid-high zenith cultivator. Fellow Taoist Han? Mo Guang's voice sounded in his mind. Unimpressed, Han Li ignored him. With his time law powers, he truly could have ended the azure-robed man more directly, but he did not wish to expose too much before Immortal Lord Hot Flame at this moment. He raised a hand and summoned back the profound heavenly gourd, the two azure bamboo clouds warm swords, and the golden lock. Then he turned to face Immortal Lord Hot Flame. "You've saved me yet again, fellow Taoist Li. I truly don't know how to repay you," Immortal Lord Hot Flame said, flying over with gratitude written plain on his face. No need for thanks. We agreed to ally, so helping each other is only right, Hanli replied. Still, I didn't expect to run into you here. Where are fellow Taoist Fox and fellow Taoist She now? I don't know, Hot Flame sighed. We were scattered by the spatial turbulence. After arriving, things were smooth at first, but I met that immortal envoy not long ago. If you hadn't arrived when you did, I would likely have died here. I've also encountered outsiders in these ruins, Han Li said. Not only those from the heavenly court, but others as well. Hot Flame's eyes widened. Were you able to tell where they came from? As far as I know, one was from the Robe Change Order, and another was a devilish being from the Devil Realm, Han Li answered. The Robe Change Order? How did they find their way in? And even a devilish being. Hot Flame's brows knotted tightly as he fell into deep thought. Han Li waited a moment, then called out, Fellow Taoist Hot Flame. Hot Flame returned to himself with an apologetic look. When our true mantra sect was destroyed by the heavenly court, Patriarch Miro used unfathomable power to transfer our entire sect into the boundless spatial turbulence. There should be no one but me who knows the entrance's location. Could it be we were followed all along without knowing? They're already inside, Han Li said evenly. Thinking too much won't change that. There are many treasures here. Better to focus on exploring and increasing our chances to survive. Hot Flame nodded. Han Li continued. There may be no one nearby, but we caused a commotion just now. We should leave as a precaution, then decide our next move. The two of them departed together. As they moved, Han Li asked, You were once a disciple of the true mantra sect, so you should know this place well, yes? I'm sure you've gained plenty already. You entered for the Great Five Elemental Illusion mantra. Have you found it? Hot Flame gave a bitter smile. No. My luck has been poor. I barely had time to hunt treasures before running into that immortal envoy. As for the Great Five Elemental Illusion mantra, I don't even know where it's hidden. How could I have found it? Han Li's eyes showed faint surprise. You don't know where it's kept either? That's troublesome. If it were lost forever, so be it, Hot Flame said, worry heavy in his tone. But I fear the heavenly court or some other force might obtain it. Han Li did not respond. Hot Flame turned to him, expression solemn. There are many powers in these ruins now. If the Great Five Elemental Illusion mantra appears, I doubt I can secure it alone. I hope you will help me seize it. I will compensate you. At present, we don't know how many powerful cultivators are here, Han Li replied. I can't promise everything, but as long as my life isn't placed in jeopardy, I'm willing to assist. Hot Flame's face brightened with relief. My thanks, fellow Taoist Li. Han Li then asked, What exactly is this Great Five Elemental Illusion mantra? You said it's a cultivation art? That's right, Hot Flame explained. It is a time attribute cultivation art. The true mantra sect has many time attribute arts, but the Great Five Elemental Illusion mantra is the most confidential of them all. I see, Han Li said with a nod. Then we truly must ensure it does not fall into outsider hands. Hot Flame had been secretly watching Han Li's expression. Seeing no greed in his face at the mention of the mantra, he finally felt a measure of ease settle into his heart. Han Li's heart was steady as still water. The so-called Great Five Elemental Illusion mantra, though famed as the true mantra sect's supreme cultivation art, did not truly stir his greed. He already held the complete mantra axis scripture, and by the scripture's own record, it was enough to carry his cultivation all the way to the great encompassment stage. To abandon a path already in hand for another merely because it sounded grand would be to fall into the trap of chasing power from one art to the next, gaining a moment's novelty, yet never mastering anything to perfection. Besides, such a top-tier method was never easy to cultivate. It might not even suit him. In this chaotic true immortal realm, what he needed most was strength that could be relied upon. Strength to survive, to preserve himself, and only after that could he afford to think of other ambitions. Still, curiosity was curiosity. If the chance to obtain it appeared, he would not refuse it out of pride. As he spoke with Immortal Lord Hot Flame, the two flew like twin rays across the heavens. Ahead, the land gradually flattened, an undulating mountain range softening into rolling hills. The hills were strange. Most stood in pairs, like camel humps huddling together, their pattern unclear and uncanny. Yet the greenery remained lush and overflowing, as though the wood veins beneath the earth were thick and vigorous. The spiritual chi is abundant here, Han Li observed. Which region of the true mantra sect are we in now? A flicker of surprise passed through Immortal Lord Hot Flame's eyes. It seems fellow Taoist Li understands our sect's layout rather well. I obtained a rough map earlier, Han Li answered calmly. I know the broad divisions. So that's how it is. Hot Flame sighed, gaze turning toward the distance. We're in the Wood Emperor area, but close to its edge. Valuable things will be scarce here. We're heading toward the central region. In the past, there were many medicine gardens there. If they haven't all been ruined, perhaps we can still find remnants. Han Li inclined his head. Then please lead the way. At once they sped up, streaking forward as two lines of light and vanishing into the far horizon. At the same time, above barren ruins wrapped in drifting white mist, a purple streak tore through the air. Within it was a purple-robed youth with curly white hair, Shi Chuan Kong. His brow knotted, his eyes cold with disgust as he glanced back again and again. Roughly 10 kilometers behind, two pursuers pressed close, riding a sleek flying shuttle that radiated the might of a 7th-grade immortal treasure. One was Lu Wuliang, palace master of the Origin Contention Immortal region, slightly hunched with a bald spot. The other was Zhao Zhen, immortal envoy once stationed at Abyssal Lake City of the Concealed Lake Immortal region, his scholar's robe white and neat, his manner composed. Lu Wuliang stared at the distance, frustration tightening his face. I didn't expect his mastery of spatial laws to be this deep. Even with the two of us combining our strength to drive this shuttle, he can still keep us at arm's length. Zhao Zhen's tone remained even. The laws of space are one of the 3 paramount laws. Using it is a tremendous drain on immortal spiritual power. He's already slowed compared to earlier. He's feeling the strain. He can't keep this up forever. And look around. The true mantra sect is fragmented into broken land masses. This piece likely isn't large. Once we force him to the edge, he'll have nowhere left to run. Lu Wuliang let out a short laugh. Then it's only a matter of time. Zhao Zhen hesitated, his eyes narrowing slightly. The issue is what to do with him after we catch him. Lu Wuliang turned, puzzled. Why would that be an issue? You may not know, Zhao Zhen said slowly. He appeared before in Jade Gathering City. He exchanged blows briefly with fellow Taoist Su Lu. I heard his identity is sensitive. Lu Wuliang's impatience flared. Speak clearly. What identity? He is from the vast Origin House, Zhao Zhen replied, and he seems to hold a very high status there. It's a pity we can't contact fellow Taoist Su Lu right now, or we could confirm it. Lu Wuliang's expression wavered, conflict passing like a shadow. Yet the next instant, his eyes hardened. Given what's already happened, peace is no longer possible. We're in the ruins of the true mantra sect. If we let him go, he may return later to exact revenge. We kill him here. Zhao Zhen's lips tightened, then he gave a small nod. That's the only feasible choice. As they spoke, the purple streak ahead suddenly dove downward toward a valley below. The two pursuers urged the shuttle after him without delay. At the valley's mouth stood 2 tall mountains facing each other like guardians. Their rock faces were riddled with burrowed holes, and around those holes ran all manner of carved runes, signs of an ancient restriction formation. But the restriction had long since been broken. Worse, half the mountain on the right had collapsed, as if struck by a giant's blade. Lu Wuliang and Zhao Zhen entered the valley and soon saw Shi Chuan Kong upon a vast stone plaza within. At the plaza's center sat a black rock, and Shi Chuan Kong was arranging something around it with deliberate speed, as though laying down a killing board. Lu Wuliang blinked in disbelief. He stops here? Does he want to die? Zhao Zhen's voice turned stern. Don't underestimate him. A cultivator who wields spatial law is more dangerous than another of the same realm. One misstep, and you'll be led by the nose. Lu Wuliang's mouth curled into a cold sneer. Whatever he's setting up, we break it before it's complete. The moment the words left him, a yellow spirit domain erupted outward from his body, like an earth dragon rising, swallowing the surroundings in a radius of over 10,000 feet. The air grew heavy. The land seemed to bow under pressure. He launched forward, his skin turning earthy brown, and in mid-air his body suddenly dropped, plummeting as if he had become a mountain itself. The impact he carried made the air rumble without ceasing. Even the space within his domain seemed to collapse downward under his weight. Zhao Jin opened his mouth as if to warn him, then forced himself to hold back, watching with taut nerves. Lu Wuliang was about to smash down onto the stone plaza and grind Shi Chuankong into dust, when silver light burst from Shi Chuankong's body. A silver spirit domain formed in an instant, enclosing only several dozen feet, but within it the very fabric of space shivered and warped. Lu Wuliang's vision blurred. The world bent. In the next heartbeat, a deafening boom shook the valley. Yet the blow landed outside the plaza. Dust roared upward like a storm. Rock fragments and debris blasted in all directions. The earth caved in nearly 1,000 feet, leaving behind an enormous crater as though a meteor had struck. From above, Zhao Zhen's eyelids twitched. In his sight, Lu Wuliang had clearly been descending toward the white stone plaza, yet somehow he had been diverted at the final instant to the side, missing the target entirely. Zhao Zhen rushed down as Lu Wuliang shot up from the crater, and asked sharply, "What happened, fellow Taoist Lu?" Lu Wuliang's eyes were cold, but there was a grudging glint within them. "That brat has tricks. The instant I was about to crush him, he used a spatial distortion method to divert my path and send me far from the intended point. But it changes nothing. If I immobilize him so he can't use that technique again, he'll be a sitting duck for you." Zhao Zhen nodded, gaze shifting back to Shi Chuankong with suspicion and vigilance. Lu Wuliang was just about to act again when Shi Chuankong turned, looking directly at them. Instead of fear, he wore a provocative smirk, like a swordsman inviting a duel at the edge of a cliff. He flipped his hand and produced a fist-sized plate. With his other hand, he extended a finger and let a single drop of silver blood essence fall onto it. In that instant, spirit patterns across the plate ignited one after another, blazing with dazzling silver radiance. Waves of formidable spatial fluctuations rolled outward, thick and sharp, like invisible blades. At the same time, a circular array around the black rock behind him lit up. The silver light it released was so brilliant that Zhao Zhen and Lu Wuliang had to avert their eyes. When the radiance finally dimmed, two figures stood within the array. On the left was a seductive woman, veiled in white, Feng Lin. Beside her stood a young man clad in a large red feather robe, his purple hair gathered into a tall bun. The two appeared and immediately bowed together toward Shi Chuankong with rigid respect. "We pay our respects to young Master Shi." By then, the plate in Shi Chuankong's hand had already shattered into ruin, as though its purpose had consumed it. He casually discarded the fragments, his brow tightening slightly. "Only the two of you?" he asked. "Where is Elder Jing?" Feng Lin answered quickly, voice tight with urgency. "After entering the ruins, I was separated from Elder Jing and Zi Qing." The purple-haired youth, Zi Qing, cupped his fist in salute and explained in a controlled, anxious tone. "While exploring a set of ruins, Elder Jing and I either triggered a restriction or suffered a sneak attack. Elder Jing was swallowed by a cloud of gray mist and vanished before he could even resist. When I saw that, I retreated at once. Before I could investigate further, I was summoned here. Thus, in the broken valley of the true mantra sect's remnants, the chase became a gathering. Yet one shadow had already been taken by gray mist, and the board Shi Chuankong laid promised that the next moves would be drenched in peril. A side note from the record: this chapter and the next, chapter 676, appear without titles.